Welcome to 10-Minute Murder, brief and bingeable true crime. My name is Joe, I'm the host, and thank you for joining today. I was recently doing some reflecting, thinking about this past year, and then back to what we've all been through over the last few years. And it got me thinking that our current time is so weird. It's so strange right now. Like nothing could pop up in the news that would surprise me, including an alien invasion. Wouldn't surprise me at all. But if you're near the same age as me, and we've lived through our childhoods were in the 80s and the 90s, it was a confusing and complicated time in life back then. Like back in the 90s when the Looney Tunes characters were in and on nearly everything. You couldn't walk into a Radio Shack without seeing 3 people wearing a Taz or Bugs Bunny t-shirt. It was weird. And Pizza Hut was trying to give away free pizzas if you just read some books. So I put the time that we're living in today into perspective. And being serious for a moment about this, since the 1980s, there's been a sharp decline in serial killing. Everything else has gone kind of bonkers, but police investigation techniques have improved. There's been advancement in DNA collection and tracking technology, and that's helped to catch killers before they have a chance to become serial. So if you're looking for a bright side as to how crazy things seem to be right now, I think that is a shining example. And thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Hey, if this is your first time listening to 10-Minute Murder, please subscribe now so that you can catch up on all the back episodes and never miss any new ones. Connect with me on social media. See the visuals that we're talking about here on the podcast. And if you like the episode, please leave a rating and review on Apple or any place that's possible. Your positive feedback is appreciated. Go to 10minutemurder.com for all things related to 10-Minute Murder. Now to today's story. Any fan of true crime knows that one moment can change a person's life, or even end it. The last minutes of Botham Jean's life were incredibly mundane, eating a bowl of ice cream in the living room of his apartment just before 10 p.m. on the 6th of September 2018. He had no way of knowing that he would not live to see the next morning, or have any opportunity to save his own life. The sequence of events that happened was both unexpected and catastrophic. Somebody walked through the door of Botham's apartment, which he had left ajar. The intruder saw Botham sitting on the couch and immediately shot him twice in the chest with a handgun. After shooting him, the intruder realized that she had made a terrible mistake. Her name was Amber Guyger, and she was a police officer who lived in the same apartment complex as the man she had just killed. In fact, Amber's apartment was in the exact same position as Botham's, but located on the 4th floor instead of the 3rd floor. At 30 years old, Amber had been a member of the Dallas police force for less than 5 years. This is what Amber insisted happened that night. She'd left work at the end of a shift that had lasted almost 14 hours and had removed her body camera, but not her handgun. She called her partner on the way home, parked her car in the apartment complex's parking garage, and walked back to what she thought was her apartment. Somehow, she had supposedly ended up on the wrong floor and walked into Botham's apartment instead of her own. Thinking the man sitting in the living room was an intruder, she acted instinctively and shot him out of fear. Amber called 911 just before 10 p.m., and Botham was rushed to the hospital, but the wounds to his chest were extensive and he was unable to be saved. With the victim dead and the perpetrator a police officer, investigators had to unpack Amber's story. Was it really believable that she had mistakenly entered the wrong apartment? And if she had, was it a good enough defense to prevent her from being charged with the murder of an unarmed man? Amber was placed on administrative leave immediately after Botham's death, but the Dallas Police Department made the decision to fire her less than a month later. Initially, she was charged with manslaughter for the killing, but this was not good enough for Botham's family or many members of the public. The story made national headlines. An unarmed black man relaxing in his own apartment being shot to death by an off-duty white cop. The racial elements were undeniable, resulting in protests across the country. Under scrutiny, Amber's version of events from that night did not seem to match up with reality. Botham's family hired an attorney who officially disputed Amber's description of what happened that night. The attorney stated that multiple witnesses had come forward independently, telling lawyers that, on the night Botham died, they heard someone knocking on the door to his apartment. After the knocking, one of the witnesses heard a woman's voice, who they assumed was Amber, repeatedly telling Botham to let her in. As well as questioning the truth of Amber's story, Botham's family attorney criticized the Dallas Police Department for making a police affidavit public that had the potential to damage the victim's reputation. The affidavit in question stated that police had seized a sizable amount of marijuana from the apartment after his death, which had absolutely nothing to do with the sequence of events that led to his murder. Amber's trial began on the 23rd of September 2019. The day before, John Creuzot, a district attorney for Dallas County, violated a gag order to give an interview about Botham's murder. The defense petitioned for a mistrial because of the violation, but after questioning of the jury revealed that they had reportedly not viewed the interview, the motion was denied, and the trial began. The trial focused on one key aspect: the difference between the initial charge of manslaughter and the accusation of murder. Convicting Amber of manslaughter only required proving that she had been reckless enough to cause Botham's death, but charging her with murder meant that the prosecution had to prove that she had the criminal intention of killing Botham deliberately. The prosecution had two main pieces of evidence asserting that Amber had killed Botham deliberately. The first, and perhaps the most significant, was the accusation that Amber had not accidentally arrived on the wrong floor of the apartment building that night. Instead, the prosecution alleged that Amber had gone to a different floor of the apartment because of the phone conversation she had with her partner on the drive home, where they had been attempting to arrange a meeting. They argued that it was implausible that Amber had not noticed that she had been on the wrong floor, and she certainly hadn't entered Botham's apartment thinking it was her own. Botham's apartment had a bright red doormat outside. Was it possible that Amber truly had not noticed any of these differences between his apartment door and hers? The second argument brought forth by the prosecution was directly related to Amber's role as a police officer. Police protocol stated that, as an officer, she should not enter a residence where a burglar is potentially inside. Instead, they should retreat and call for backup. If Amber had exited the apartment instead of shooting Botham, backup would have arrived quickly. The police station was 2 blocks away from the apartment complex. Another police officer, Michael Lee, took the stand. Michael stated that in Amber's position, he would have taken cover and called for backup using his police radio. He stated that both he and Amber were trained to wait for backup to arrive before entering premises where there is an intruder. Michael also insisted that had he been in Amber's shoes, he would have immediately looked to the suspect's hands to see if he was armed before shooting. If Amber would have done this, Botham would have lived. He was holding an ice cream bowl and did not have a gun. Meanwhile, the defense argued that Amber had genuinely believed that she was in her own apartment. Because she thought that Botham was an intruder in her home, she had believed that she was legally able to use deadly force in self-defense, regardless of the fact that Botham had not been aggressive to her in any way. It took only 6 hours for the jury to reach their conclusion. Amber Guyger was found guilty of murdering Botham Jean on the 1st of October 2019. Previously, the last Dallas police officer to be charged with murder had been convicted in 1973, and now the timer was reset to 0. The following day, Amber's sentence hearing took place. She was sentenced to serve 10 years in prison. The sentencing hearing was highly emotional and brought Amber's character even further into question, with racist and offensive social media posts she had made in the past being broadcast to the courtroom. Incredibly, both Botham's father, Bertram, and his younger brother, Brant, publicly forgave Amber for her actions. Brant even gave Amber a hug during her sentencing, while Bertram admitted that, although he forgave Amber, he wished her sentence had been firmer. In October 2019, Joshua Brown, a key witness in the case, was murdered. He had been Botham's neighbor and had moved to another apartment complex after the killing took place. He was shot and killed in the parking lot of his new apartment complex. An investigation later revealed that these murderers, 3 men, had been engaging in a drug deal with Joshua at the time of the shooting. Later that year, the three men were indicted for capital murder. In August of 2020, Amber's attorney appealed her conviction, stating that there was not sufficient evidence to prove that she should be charged with murder instead of manslaughter. The appeal requested that Amber either be acquitted of her charges or that her charges should be reduced to criminally negligent homicide. The appeal was unanimously denied in 2021. The Fifth Court of Appeals of Texas upheld that not only had the jury's verdict been reasonable, but that Amber's testimony in court had aligned with the charges she'd been convicted of. The fact remained, Amber supposedly entering the wrong apartment did not change what happened inside, and it didn't provide any defense for shooting and killing Botham in his own home. Currently, Amber is incarcerated in the Mountain View Correctional Center and is eligible for release in September of 2024. Everybody involved in the case has their own opinion about the events that led Amber to Botham's door that night, but Amber is the only one who knows the truth.